I can hear you. Great. Welcome aboard.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, so, and we were expecting Susan and we're expecting John Trasviña, who I wanted to have on board because of the editorial he did Monday. It just seems to, things at the school board just seem to be getting worse and worse. And I look at it and I see this, it's almost as if there was sort of a coup after the recall. First you had Alita Fisher ending up replacing Ann Sue because Ann Sue made those remarks, and then Lainey Motometti quit. But anyway, I'm not the expert on this. I know, Liz, you've been following it you've been following the school board to an extent, and certainly John has. So
yes, I kind of agree with you. It does feel like a coup.
Yeah, because we recalled one member of the Board of Supervisors, and it was accompanied by a relatively radical change in the direction of the board, and positive direction. But the school board, we recalled 3 members of the school board, and it looks like the effects of that are going to end up being completely undone.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's my assessment from a very, very casual look at things.
Yes, I feel like there's definitely less transparency, as they should have gone in the direction after the recall. But as you're seeing, and John will probably speak to it as well, is that's going in the opposite direction, especially with regards to the latest school board meeting, where there were tons of parents and educators who came to give public comment. And the public comment was cut off early because I felt like there was too much criticism of the Board of Education and Maria Sue.
Yeah, and I think one of the problems that, and again, I'm seeing this from further away than you are, is that first off, I just look at the whole mean, as in MEIN, of especially Eddie Kim. Eddie Kim is the writer at Gazetteer, but and Matt Alexander was being extremely arrogant and just sort of contemptuous of a very restive public. I think they act as if the public has no reason to be restive about what they're doing.
It's just bizarre. It's bizarre. Yeah. They're acting like despots, and almost like how dare you ask? How dare you question? How dare you become involved? It's really bizarre.
And the other issues with regards to Maria Sue is apparent. If you look at the timeline and you look at the fact that Connie Chan sat as budget chair of the Board of Supervisors, sat on her contract for months. It looks like Sue was under significant, or that was a method to put her under serious pressure. And of course, that succeeded to that pressure, apparently. It just, anyway.
From what I heard from the last BOE meeting, there were a lot of parents that spoke about the Mission Elementary Center TK program. Some of those don't even have teachers since the school year has started. So day after day, these kids come in and there could be a substitute, there couldn't be. They don't have staffing, a principal. And I heard some parents say that that's, in contradiction to what is being seen on the webpage that Maria Sue communicates out, that everything is fine and dandy.
Interesting. Well, John and Susan have just logged on, and I just invited them to speak, so hopefully we'll be able to get them on for a little bit more of their insights as well. John, are you out there? Susan, are you out there? Let me try inviting them again. Okay, John just asked me to speak, or just asked to be allowed to speak, and I approved him again.
Hello.
Susan.
Yep.
How are you?
Good. I had a nail trimming appointment for my pitopotamus, Marcy.
Hello.
And then my nail trimmer also did Quinn, and then we didn't have enough cash on hand, so then I had to go to an ATM, and yeah, one of those kind of mornings. But Marcy mellows, nails are trimmed, and she's sound asleep. She's deaf, so she can't listen to us, but she's here for moral support.
There you go.
All 12 years of her.
Good morning, Susan.
Oh, wow.
Huh?
Good to be with you.
Hi.
Hi, John.
Hello, John.
Hi, John.
Good morning.
Okay. So it's 11 o'clock. I'll go ahead and do our formal introduction, although everybody here knows who we are, I take it. But this is the Sunday brunch space at the Voice of San Francisco. We've got, I'm Mike Egge, the editor-in-chief. We've got Susan Dyer Reynolds, our editorial director. John Trasviña is our education and legal contributor. Erica Sandberg is our business and recovery contributor. Liz has been another one of our data and education contributors. And there seems to be a lot going on at the Board of Education in the school district that isn't that great. And so I felt between that and the editorial that John wrote for us, we published Monday or Tuesday about the seeming lack of transparency in the actions of the school board. I thought that we would talk about that today, time permitting. So John, why don't you bring us in and tell us a little bit about what you wrote about?
Thanks, Mike. I want to start with something very positive and very important about the school district. And that is this Thursday at 11 o'clock is Turkey Day. It's the undefeated Balboa Buccaneers are playing the Washington Eagles in the championship. These kids work hard throughout the year. Their coaches and their families and everyone is going to cheer them on. But they work really hard, and this is a great tradition of San Francisco. It goes back probably 100 years when Lowell and Polly would play at Kezar on Thanksgiving Day. Would have 60,000 people in the in the stadium. Now it's fewer, but this is a positive thing for kids. Interestingly enough, I'll stray away from football in a second, but St. Ignatius and Sacred Heart are also playing in a different league championship. Their game is in San Jose, and wouldn't you know it, our assemblyman, Matt Haney, has decided to get involved on that one, and he's trying to move the game to San Francisco. I don't know if there's any political interest in that on his part, but since the state assembly doesn't usually get involved in Catholic schools, and most of the SI and SH kids and families this side of town, but that's also happening in high school football.
Oh. Would it be better if it moved to San Francisco?
Well, it'd be better for the kids to see it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, cool.
But moving from football to political football, we've got. I've been watching school board meetings since I was the student member of the board at Lowell back in the 70s.
Wow.
And I would say this last meeting could be in the bottom 5 in terms of new lows for the school board.
Oh dear.
It started off, on the issue, Mike, of transparency. The meetings are on GovTV. They're live in person, and they're also online. Because the school board has cut back on its regular meetings to now they call every other meeting a progress monitoring meeting, they said it doesn't need to be on GovTV. Notwithstanding the fact that they had their most significant decision on the agenda, which is selecting a new superintendent, given at last minute notice. So they start the meeting. There's problems with there's no GovTV. There's problems with the Zoom connection. And Manuel Martinez, the general counsel of the board, says, got to stop the meeting, got to make sure we're on Zoom. So what do as there's dead air and dead time? Phil Kim, Alita Fisher, board member, and Lisa Wiseman Ward start telling jokes elementary school jokes from. I've seen it happen at a previous meeting where somebody brings out this book of jokes from their kid. So they're yucking it up with all these very sanitary, very, very elementary school jokes. And they do that a couple of times because the technology breaks down a couple of times. During public comment, one or more parents says, you know how frustrating and angry and hurtful this is? Frustrating and angry for us, hurtful and hurtful to hear you guys telling jokes. Meanwhile, we're here because, as Liz alluded to earlier, there are not enough teachers in the TK program and the pre-kindergarten program. There are problems going on at the school sites. And here they come to the board meeting, here they see their board members telling jokes.
That's so grotesque. It's just grotesque.
That was just number one of 4 lowlights of the meeting. And when I say lowlights, I don't mean lowlights. I mean
That's a dad joke.
Okay. It was a high school joke, not an elementary school joke.
And John, as you were saying, it's heartbreaking to hear teachers say they had their paychecks delayed, and they rely on these checks for their rent, their food, and some of them were delayed in this holiday week, by at least 7 days, 10 days. And then some people were told, well, if you want your check, you have to come in person. So there's all these other financial issues that they're still struggling with.
Right. For some reason, and this is not even, I don't think it's a financial, it could be financial, but the school district said, well, substitutes are different kinds of employees than the regular teachers. Therefore, we can delay their pay by 5 days. Instead of being paid on the 5th, they get paid on the 10th, or I'm sure the exact dates. But it was done with no notice, and the substitutes who already feel very disregarded and disrespected because the school district has so many substitutes, they have to scramble around. Some have testified at previous board meetings. They have to get up at 4 or 5 in the morning to get on the list or to find out what openings are available. They don't feel that they're well treated, and this delay of their paycheck, while administratively there may be a justification, there's apparently no feeling on their part that the school district understood the impact of delaying your paycheck without notice by 5 days. So there was that.
Yeah, and then there's that new, or the Red Rover system that these substitutes use, as you were saying, getting up at 4 or 5 a.m. to refresh this web page to see what, teaching jobs are open, and they have to constantly refresh it the day of, and there's nothing that's coming in. So some subs who have been teaching for years are saying, well, what happened to certain schools having sort of a priority list for substitutes that have been working there for many years? So it just seemed like the Board of Education was so out of touch with what was really happening day to day for parents, kids, and for teachers and substitute teachers.
And yet, with 72 hours notice, they wanted to put on the agenda giving a contract to Maria Sue to run from January of next year to June of 2028. And while one of the big issues has been lack of consultation, lack of involvement of parents or teachers or others with this issue and other issues, there is yet to be any identification of any reason why they had to do it on 72 hours notice. There's a typically 12 days notice for the draft agenda, and they put on things like approving kids to go to an out-of-town field trip, or buying this product, or minor matters, relatively minor matters. And the most important decision of the school board gets virtually no public notice, and it came in late at the meeting. The meeting ended up going until 12:30. The superintendent's contract didn't come up until after 10 o'clock. It went through unanimously. But again, I think also alluded to earlier, the issue of how the city contract relates to the superintendent's contract. This is a unique arrangement and situation. As those following the board know, last October of 2024, the school board, the prior school board, held a Sunday meeting, 9 a.m., that resulted by the end of the week in Matt Wayne, the then superintendent, resigning. Maria Sue had been sent over as part of a team from City Hall sent by Mayor Breed to help out. She ended up becoming superintendent, and it was contingent upon an agreement signed by Matt Alexander, who was then president of the board, and Mayor Breed, that was to be approved by the Board of Education and Board of Supervisors. This was in November of 24. The Board of Education immediately took action. They did all the right things to install Maria as superintendent. They waived the state requirement that the superintendent has to be a teacher or an school administrator, which Maria is not. They're allowed to do that under the state rules. They're allowed to waive that requirement. They did that. Everything was done right, except the agreement required the Board of Supervisors to approve it, because Maria remained a city employee. And so she was getting city pension, she was getting city money. The school district would repay the city, and the school board would be the one in charge of the superintendent. But as a practical matter and as a legal matter, the agreement had to be approved by the Board of Supervisors. This came up at the same time that Hillary Ronan was exiting off of the board back in November of 24. Understandably, it could have gotten caught in a file somewhere, or just caught in the transition between a new board of supervisors, old to new. Connie Chan became chair of the budget committee. It became under her purview early 2025, earlier this year. Instead of bringing it up and improving it so that the contract could become approved and official, in March, she told this president of the board, I want to hold it over until the fall of 2025. And in October, she said, I want to hold it over again until April of 2026. Without any particular reason for doing so, and not acknowledging that this step had to be done in order for the contract to be approved. So I wrote about it, and I think that I am told that partly prompted them to actually figure out what to do. And City Hall said, well, the school board should just hire her. So instead of doing what they were supposed to do, which is, and this is the Chan Budget Committee was supposed to review the contract and then recommend to the full board to approve it or not. They didn't do it. And similarly, in terms of the oversight of the Board of Supervisors over the education, the city sends a lot of money to the school district every year. There's something called the Student Success Fund, and part of the Student Success Fund is a requirement that the school district, through the Department of Children, Youth, and Family, report to the board, here's how the money was spent. Well, the first round of funding, there was no report. At that time, Maria Sue was head of the Department of Children, Youth, and Family. There was no report. And on this time, again, there was no report. The city is sending over a lot of money to the school board. The charter says there's supposed to be some oversight. There's supposed to be a report on how the money is spent. Nothing has been done, except the money keeps flowing.
What a mess.
And I think also you had mentioned in the comment, John, that there was a budget gap that ballooned since December.
That's correct. Back again to 2024, when Maria Sue came in, she inherited and she reported to the board, we're going to have to cut $113 million in June of 25. And that's not only that, we need to cut another $15 million in the subsequent budget year. By the time they passed the budget in June, that extra $15 million to cut in the following year ballooned to $59 million. As of last week, the board says it's no longer $15 million, it's no longer $59 million, it's now $102 million. but with no explanation of how it got there, whether the cuts that they did make were enough or whether they miscalculated, and no report from the superintendent of here's how we're going to do it. So they push through her contract, but they don't and either they don't know how she's going to cut, or they haven't told the public how the 102 million are going to be cut. There are other things that we haven't been told. We hope the board has been told, but we don't know because they haven't told this public why they voted to extend her contract, and they certainly haven't shared. Neither the superintendent nor the board has shared any of these plans with the public either.
Great.
There was one other, I will cede the floor in a second. There's one other low light of the meeting, and that was on a resolution called the Strong Schools Resolution that talks about cutting schools, the $102 million future deficit, and some other matters. And it was not clear how that got on the agenda, but it was on the agenda, and everything on the agenda is a product of Maria Sue and Phil Kim and Jamie Hewling, the vice chair of the board. And there was again, this was the public input was only in public comment earlier in the evening. By the time they got to it after 11 o'clock, there was nobody left really in the room. They went on till 12:30, and there was a lot of discussion. Commissioner Matt Alexander said, I don't know, I don't understand what this resolution is saying we are doing. And to the extent you're telling me now, it's not clear to me why we have to tell the superintendent to do this. She should just do this. So they went back and forth about, and Phil Kim said, well, then maybe we don't need such a long resolution. He didn't seem to really want to own that it should be shorter or longer. And eventually they said, okay, well, we've had a lot of discussion. We'll put it over to the next meeting. And after that discussion, Vice President of the board, Hewling, said, I just want to remark that it's really odd and disappointing that school board members, we know what the superintendent should be doing. We each of us tell the superintendent in our one-on-one meetings with her in between school board meetings. And she said, I'm really surprised that my colleagues don't actually say that in public what they say in private. and Commissioner Alita Fisher jumped in and said, you're looking at me when you say that. I resent that. And they went back and forth a couple of times, really trying to figure out who's saying what to whom. I think Phil Kim finally interceded and said, well, this is probably why we shouldn't be meeting after midnight.
Oh, Lord.
But it was a real public show of acrimony that is infrequent, I would say.
Well, yeah, and again, I think that sort of, I would look at Alita Fisher and her background and sort of see her as one of the more maligned characters on the school board, because I don't think she, if you look at the whole tenure of her campaign and how she got elected and what she's done since then, she doesn't really seem to represent students or parents so much as, different programs that want to be put in, the people behind different programs that want to be run by the school district or the teachers union or whatever. And it just, it just doesn't seem to, she doesn't impress me as being the most public-minded member of the board. I just look at the political pattern here where, Connie Chan sat on Sue's contract for so long, and then after she finally stopped sitting on it and it was up for approval, this person who we had originally thought would help to undo a lot of the craziness of the school district has now become part of it. I mean, am I completely off base there, or?
I would say it's unclear to me whether Connie Chan intentionally holding on to the contract and not having it go to a vote of the Board of Supervisors. I can't tell whether that was to do a favor to Maria Sue, or was it to put her under greater pressure to say, okay, well, on school closures or on this or on that, you have to answer to me because I'm holding on to your contract. Because the reality is, when you look at the hearing that the Connie Chan committee did have, the budget committee did have, and didn't get a report from the board or from the DCYF about how they're spending the money, there was no questioning, no real oversight. So it's not clear to me whether there was a strategy in holding on to the contract. I think probably most people at City Hall would say there's always a strategy. Just it's unclear what it was.
Yeah, that's another problem right then and there.
But it's a lot of money that's going on from City Hall to the school district, and it's not clear because they don't tell us how is it effectively spent, and is it actually serving the kids? And there are people who say, "Don't bother me with the school board or the school district. My kids have already graduated, or I'm sending my kids to private school, or I have no kids." But our kids are there. Our dollars are there too, and that's what needs to be recognized, and frankly, our futures are there as well. The at the Board of Appeals last Wednesday, there was a proposal to have a research lab for DoorDash to research drones, use of drones to do that final delivery of your sandwich.
What?
Many people from the Latino community, from the Mission District, said they're creating jobs. They're not creating jobs for our kids, our community, and part of that is because the schools are not preparing our kids for all those tech jobs that are coming in.
Exactly.
And that's something that, while it's great to have the companies coming in, they're not creating those jobs are not getting to people who are here, and in part is because we are not effective in educating the kids, and that's why we put in more money into the schools, but we don't know where the money is going.
Yeah.
And another point that was made by a parent who was there talking about the lack of staffing at the school, they were given excuses over and over again that, the teachers haven't been fully credentialed, or they have to do all this vetting. And parents did point out, well, you guys figured out that credentialing to hire Maria Sue because she doesn't have the appropriate background, and you got her hired. Why aren't you figuring this out as leaders to make sure that our kids have teachers?
Yeah, that's. I mean, if you look at the number of substitutes that the district hires and uses regularly, to the point where they've essentially they're no longer an exception for many classes, and there's an entire, union category, representation category for substitute teachers. It just seems, why don't we have enough regular teachers? That's another issue. I just
Well,
yeah. Go ahead,
Mike. We also spend a lot of money, probably more than most school districts, on teacher coaching. And the school district, school board heard a report from the staff about coaching, and they said, well, we see some improvements in some of the schools, but because we want to keep the records anonymous as to who's getting coached, we don't know whether the teachers are getting coached have the kids in the classes who are doing better, or whether it's just the school itself. So again, it gets back to their record keeping. They can't produce the records to show that there are improvements or that there's effectiveness in their strategies. And the bottom line is, as we look to next year's state education budget, the literacy coaches are paid by one-time money from the state. So if the school district is going to get behind coaching, which they seem to be heavily invested in it, they're going to have to pick up the tab for that in future years. which means something else that's going to have to compete as they cut $102 million from the budget. So there are a lot of questions that go straight to how kids are being taught in the classroom, let alone how teachers are being paid or how money is being invested and utilized.
Interesting.
I also think too that, I mean, you know, let's be honest, the salaries for teachers, you know, my dad was a high school teacher. He coached, he taught driver's ed, taught geography, was after school hours and hours, you know, often didn't come home till 8, 9 o'clock, left in the morning at 6, had to go, you know, early to prep. He was grading on the weekends. And he topped out after almost 30 years at $50,000 a year. And I'm not so sure that teachers are making even that much more. I mean, I don't know, but I don't think they're making a lot more than that now. I mean, does anybody know what SFUSD pays?
I do not.
I don't, but I think I've seen a figure of 84,000, and maybe even higher. But how that compares to the dollars when your dad was teaching, I don't know.
They're still not
estimated about 65,079 per year. So 85 is the high end, and 50 and change is the low end. That is according to Google's AI. So you've got your warning there. But yeah, that's pretty bad for San Francisco, given the cost of living here, particularly the cost of housing, things like that.
Yeah.
And I think, I think in many ways, the school district is suffering from a doom loop situation where if you don't have enough kids' butts to sit in seats, you don't get enough funding. And then you end up with this, and so you end up having to you end up with these sort of dysfunctional situations that may be born of scrambling for funding, and that causes parents to take their kids out of the system. Does that sound like a reality to anybody out there?
It can be a vicious cycle of people leave the district. The district gets less revenue because the revenue is attendance based.
Exactly.
And then they have even less money to follow the following year.
Yeah, and when I was at I think a house event among the Asian American community to meet Maria Sue and Phil Kim, Maria Sue kept saying that, she wanted to turn into a service model to listen to parents more. But what ended up happening instead, as parents were sharing, basically that they had all these issues with the lottery system. There were all these glitches and you can't get into your neighborhood school. And at face value, as she was doing these town halls, she was definitely acknowledging that. But behind the scenes, there wasn't much that was being done to, prevent parents from being frustrated, getting assignments that were across the city when they couldn't get their neighborhood schools. And so there's an increasing exodus of families leaving San Francisco Unified School District, which costs us millions of dollars, as John was mentioning, in state funding. And then there's also a lot of issues around, right now, there were huge issues around security at Lowell, which happened, it's an increasing issue. We had, 2 bomb threats already. And there were also reports of when a Lowell alum came to Lowell to buy some merch, he smelled a lot of weed when a security guard confronted him from the car. And so now there's all these issues about, well, maybe you have security issues because the people that you're hiring are maybe under the influence when they're actually supposed to be working and securing the perimeter, which was a huge issue around when they found a guy sleeping in the girls' locker room at Lowell. So all of these issues kind of bubble up.
Oh, my Lord.
Yeah. And the whole unvetted ethnic studies that also, pushes parents out to go to private school options or leave the district altogether.
Yeah. The ethnic studies curriculum was another big thing, because it was a few months ago where it created this huge furor, partially fueled by us, and the diligent work of Mr. Trasviña again. We actually got some links to national headlines from that one. But you had this program where they were doing things like, some of the cards in the presentation deck for the curricula was giving the example of the Chinese Red Guards as an organization to, is this an organization that should have been emulated or respected in terms of, asserting right, protecting rights for people? And it's like, oh yeah, right. That just really boggled people's minds. And apparently they were supposed to come out with a report on what ethnic studies curricula they're going to adopt, and it got delayed this week.
So there are actually two reports that are going to be done. One is the report that was delayed, although many people who have been working on this issue were unaware of the first report that was due this month. The school district is doing two reports. One is on the old curriculum without some of the excessive stuff that you just described, because they've said, okay, we're not going to do that anymore. But there was an old curriculum that the school district put together itself. That's going to be studied, as well as the curriculum that is being presented that was bought without the board seeing it for the kids this fall, called Voices, the Voices curriculum. So both of there apparently there may be two reports, one on the old curriculum that the school district put together, and then this one, and it'll be before the board in January or February as to which one will go forward beyond next year.
Interesting.
And SFUSD is an outlier among school districts. One, because it mandates a year of ethnic studies instead of 6 months. And second is because the state mandate for ethnic studies, which was 6 months, has been interpreted by the Attorney General, the Governor, and the Finance Office saying, because it's an unfunded state mandate, there really is no mandate until the legislature pays for it. And they've said, because the legislature hasn't funded it, nobody has to do it, except those schools that mandate it themselves. Then you do have to do it because you've said you're doing it because of your own priorities, not because the state's telling you to do it. So San Francisco has a year-long program, whereas other schools don't have the program.
Yeah, and this year-long program is basically being forced onto freshmen who haven't had any other basic background in history. And even most recently, in this current year, September of 2025, students were already reporting in this unvetted ethnic studies class that teachers were writing on the whiteboard, white equals wealth, and asking students to discuss, like, in what ways do Jewish Americans have white privilege? I mean, this is happening right now. So it's very concerning. And there are a lot of complaints. And, these are the kind of things that steer, parents away from wanting to put their kids in San Francisco Unified School District, because they feel like there's just an overreach of indoctrination.
Do you think it's driving any students out? Like parents who are going, you know what, I'm just not going to be doing this. Do we have any evidence that there has been kind of a moving away from the public school system here in San Francisco because of it?
Yes, we do see a huge amount of uptick in private schools attendance, and even Lowell, I think this past year, they had a much higher acceptance rate just because there were fewer students wanting to go there. They are choosing private school because they don't want to deal with the indoctrination, but also, you know, you remember John was the one who broke the article about the grading for equity. So even though we had recalled the Board of Education, this was trying to be slipped through in a PowerPoint doc. So these are the kind of things that really scare parents away. And the numbers do show that there's a huge amount of exodus from public schools into private schools into San Francisco. And when that's not an affordability issue, people leave the district.
Yeah, and so the reason that I'm asking that is, do you also think that the school board is aware of that? I mean, they can put their head in the sand, I suppose, and just pretend all of this isn't happening. But do you think that they are aware of this? I mean, they're going to be quite desperate. If you don't have enough students in these schools, they lose funding. There are problems. So how much do you think that they are even acknowledging that this is a real issue?
Well, they're definitely aware of it.
Okay.
Because we read the same reports they get, and you can historically you will always see, and the district relies on a bump up at ninth grade. So kids in K to 8 in either independent schools or in Catholic schools, they come back to the school district for high school. Yep. You always see an increase. We didn't see that same increase when Lowell went to a lottery. So the school district depends upon an increase after 8th grade into 9th grade. So that's something that they look at, and they'll notice that you can look at the numbers over the years. They will certainly look at the number coming up. Last year, the school district, again, their own.
But do they associate it with the crazy stuff that they're doing?
Well, that's that. I think that was Erica's point.
Yeah.
Is they're aware, but do they acknowledge? And that's where the acknowledgement part doesn't come up. It's hard to say because there's so many. I know one parent who said, this is like the straw that breaks the camel's back. It's like one that says, I need to take my kids out. Sometimes it's grading for equity. Sometimes it's the mandated on ethnic studies. Sometimes it's just a frustration of dealing with a situation of their own individual child in their school. But last year, the school district offered 10,000 more admissions letters, and it has 300 fewer kids in the enrollment this year than last year. So even though they're trying to get more people in, fewer kids are going to be there. They know that just demographically, in terms of birth rates, the eligible population for the schools is going to drop. So it gets into issues of school closures and future changes.
And to our faces, Maria Sue and Phil Kim did say to parents in these meetings that they recognize and acknowledge this huge exodus of parents leaving San Francisco Unified School District. But in terms of actually doing anything about it, I haven't seen that. California has the highest rate of kids going to private school. I mean, San Francisco has like 1/3 of all their K-12 students in private schools. And the average, I would say, at the California level is a little less than 10%. So we are, 3 times as high for private school enrollment than other California cities.
Another example of what Liz is talking about is the school district, after a delay, is going to open up a new elementary school, Mission Bay, because there are more little kids running around Mission Bay, and they go to schools elsewhere. So they're finally opening up a school there. It's going to open up in the fall, but they're only opening it to pre-K and kindergarten. They're leaving the rest of the school empty. The school will be full over a period of time as the kindergartners become first graders, the first grade becomes second graders, second grade become third graders. But for the next few years, parents are going to be seeing a school that's partially occupied, and they're still going to have to send their kid to if they're a second grader, they're never going to get into that school because second grade the kid will be too old to get into that school. So that's an example where they could open it up for all the grades. It would make some sense, and it would certainly appeal to families in that area and in other areas to be able to go there. But they're not doing it that way.
And there's also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go. You go ahead.
And another issue is bullying. And I was just talking to a parent recently about it at Washington High School. And she has several kids. She said she's already had to move 3 kids out of a particular high school because the bullying was not addressed. The kids are being threatened, and there is like a downplay almost in, I would say, youth crime in general. So unless a kid comes after you and tries to kill you with a weapon, they're not doing the stuff that they need to protect the kids. So bullying is a huge issue. And it's almost like a restorative justice approach, and the kids just have to keep going back to the school. So instead, they've had to move out. And I'm going to do a more intensive investigative article on the bullying piece. But I've heard of it also just from the students themselves that talk about it and how to, ways that they're avoiding it. But there's definitely some groups that are constantly doing it again and again and targeting, large parts of the student body, and they're not necessarily being effectively addressed in the schools.
Yeah, I just, when I look at all of this, I tend to think, because I'm a politics guy, I tend to look at the political dimensions of this. And one of the things that I see is parents aren't well represented. They aren't being represented well in the school board. And it seems to me that teachers are not being well represented by the teachers union either. And I look at some of the makeup of the officers of the teachers union and what they seem to be more interested in. They seem to be more interested in doing things like motivating students and giving them extra credit for being involved in demonstrations against Israel, etc., than doing the brass tacks lessons they need to be productive citizens and to be able to work and build lives for themselves. I look at the 2 vice presidents, including one that represents substitutes, and they're both members of the Party for Socialism and Liberation, which is this ad hoc group that was started here in San Francisco and is sort of a successor to International Answer and some of those very far left groups. We're talking far left, not represented on the table by the Board of Supervisors or other elected bodies in the city. We're talking very far left. We have a vice president of the teachers union who said that it was good that Russia invaded Ukraine, and so on and so forth. You have to wonder what the real priorities are in a system like that, where the teachers union is so politicized. Another thing I understand is that, and again, part of this is due to the fact that teachers are state employees, not municipal employees, but city employees are generally able to get their medical benefits paid for. I think teachers are only able to get like half their benefits paid for, something like that. Anybody know about that?
About the teachers?
Yeah, about the teachers' medical benefits and who covers what versus other city employees.
I don't.
I had heard that there was like a ridiculously big deficit there, and I'm going, okay, well, why isn't the teachers union campaigning to fix that instead of campaigning for the rights to organize students into revolutionaries for whatever cause they're in? Things that I don't get.
Exactly. And, when I talk to some of the teachers and even principals, some of them are saying things like, to go back to the element about being represented, they're talking about like security on campus, right? And a school resource officer, when we used to have, you know, the memorandum of understanding between SFPD and SF Unified School District, it allowed for this trained, you know, officer friendly that could be on the campus and be at the ready and call of any of the schools if anything happens. Like what happened at Presidio Middle School, where there was a homeless drunk guy that was throwing beer bottles over the fence to middle school girls, and he was doing all these lewd acts. And because they didn't have this memorandum of understanding to, you know, have this quick and easy access to SFPD, the teachers had to go out and drag this guy down the street, you know, to get him away from the campus. And these are the kind of issues where when I talked to the principal, he's like, oh, we would definitely want to have this memorandum of understanding back up again. We want to have these resources. And it was an issue at Lowell because they have a huge perimeter, right? But they don't have enough security employees or qualified security employees to make sure that all the potential entrances across the campus are being secured. So that's a huge issue.
Yeah, well, you were telling me about the story you're doing about this, about the security guard and a Lowell alumni's confrontation with him, and I was just, there's a video that's attached to that I was just absolutely sort of flabbergasted by, you know, given the guy's whole, you know, the guy just does not act like a professional security guard. He was basically just holding a radio and throwing him insults at the guy, and you know, I just found that absolutely amazing.
Exactly. So there's the quality in terms of the security guard employment. How is that vetted? And basically you have this huge perimeter, and this guy, you hear the vice principal saying in the video, oh, he's doing us a favor by coming here because he's supposed to be on sick leave or something, or he's supposed to be sick today. So it's so incomprehensible to think, wow, you hired somebody who's probably under the influence in his car or had some possession, because the alumni smelled it and said his eyes were bloodshot and he was glazed over. So these are huge concerns, and you kind of wonder about, well, who's keeping the kids safe, and how is the Board of Education or the teachers union representing the real teachers that are there who want to have this relationship back with SFPD and the schools, again, to not only protect the students, but train them. How it's about training around how to deal with drugs and all of these things, and even texting 911 when you're on the Muni and you see something crazy happening, right? These are the kind of things that they would have a long relationship with, that keeps the kids protected too. Like, oh, you have intent. The bullying that I heard was, it was frightening, where a kid was basically saying to another kid, you know, I'm gonna kill you and make your mouth bleed. And these are the things that parents have to face, and they don't really know. You know, these are the kind of things that their kids would be trained in if they had a service resource officer, right? That comes from SFPD to help these kids with all types of things.
That's interesting what people say in a video clip, because actually what I saw in the video clip was the security guy was actually pretty effective. He was saying to the parent, you need to go, like everybody else, you need to go to the front of the school, sign in, and then you can either show your child around or go to the alumni office or go to the admissions office. Whatever was going on with the security guard, he seemed to do the job. And the other part of it is that Lowell is like 29 acres. And it's been that way since it opened in '65. It's very hard to patrol that entire school. It's next to the mall. When Stone Sound eventually does its development, it's going to be even more of a challenge. There was a few years ago when some students wanted the school vice principal to be patrolling Lake Merced, because kids go there, and the kids have been going there for the last 50 years. It's a challenge. I think that back on the issue of the SROs. This is the SRO agreement with the police department was ended by the school board back in 2019 or 2020. And it's really up to the board to step up and say, working with the other agency, are we getting everything we need, or are we not? I think there's a strong case to be made for the SROs. I just want to mention one issue parenthetically. I understand when you compare the school benefits to the teacher benefits to other school districts, that's where the pay issue becomes a little bit different. Is that the school district doesn't pay as much as other school districts in dollars, but they actually tend to be relatively more generous on benefits than other school districts. How they compare with the city may be a different story, but at least among other school districts, they do a pretty good job on terms of healthcare.
Interesting. Okay.
Well, but perhaps a future article.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. In fact, I think, in general. Also, I'm thinking I should have invited Elizabeth Stafford to come on board today as well, because she's been doing a lot of good work for us with regards to her experience as a teacher at Lowell and some of the frustrating things that she's had to deal with, including with the union. Any other thoughts? What solutions do we think we could see out there in terms of solving some of these problems?
More people need to read The Voice of San Francisco. I actually get a lot of positive feedback from the people who read what I write about the superintendent, the board, what's going on, the data. But overall, not enough people know that.
Yeah.
It's hard. And one of the things that Supervisor Preston did a few years ago, he took the lead in putting all of our local elections into the even years. Now, the school board elections have always been in the even years since about 1972, but it's very difficult for the school board to have the attention of the voters when they're in an even year, presidential year, gubernatorial year. So I think something as the city charter is examined by SPUR and by other groups, putting all of our local elections in the odd years. What's different now is that everybody gets a ballot by mail. So there's much less of a burden on being able to vote. I think we can have a good voter turnout in an odd year as well as in an even year. And it would allow all the local candidates, supervisor, school board, and others to be able to really be out in the communities without the competition of the TV ads and the online ads of the governor and the statewide and presidential candidates.
Yeah, I agree with that very much. I mean, the whole issue of moving those elections to all 1 year, basically every other year is when all the elections happen in the city. It didn't make any sense to me. And again, the down ballot issues and candidates get lost in that regard. I've got a notification from Robert O'Reilly. Says John Trasviña should establish a shadow school board made up of the same or fewer member numbers with substantial educational policy credibility to publish, perhaps in the VOSF, their own votes / decisions juxtaposed with the real board's member votes over time. That's an interesting suggestion.
So I have a suggestion as parents. There's a nice chant that certain members of the hard left will say over and over again: "Stand up, fight back." And stand up, fight back. If I were a parent who's sending their child to SF Unified School District School, and the ethnic studies course is being taught, I would be very firm in my opposition. I would voice it to the teacher. I would have my student be very vocal, to be very firm in knowing what's right and what's wrong, and taking it up at PTO meetings. That's what they're there for. Make your voice heard. It's really important that you don't feel disempowered, because They'll run roughshod over you. They really will. But I tell you, I've been in enough parent-teacher meetings to know when you come together as parents, you can do amazing things. In fact, I remember when my daughter was going to public school in the elementary level here, and they tried to pass off a teacher who was had very serious infractions. There was evidence that she had physically assaulted some children, and she was just sort of moved into their school. They changed it from one school to the next, and I can tell you it was like a mob where the parents refused to let that happen, and it didn't, so it stopped. So really kind of find your voice. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to be loud, because you do have to take control. I'm a firm believer in public school, but that doesn't mean that you just lay down and just let everything happen. You get out there.
Yeah, and I think the whole, as you had mentioned, the whole election system. I mean, Matt Alexander got reelected with 12.11%. And that just seems ridiculous. That's how we are electing board members to the Board of Education.
Wow.
I mean, that's the type of thing that clearly could be improved, is the way that we do the elections. I mean, if we're pushing 4 top candidates, but people can get in with 12%, that's not representative of the voting, parent and voting constituents.
Yeah, I mean, that's
I don't want to quibble with Liz, but the reason it's 12% is he actually got almost half the voters. But since each voter can vote 4 times, you can't get more than 25% of the vote when you're running if everybody votes for 4 people.
Right.
But the point is that not as you know, Liz, there's not enough attention being given to the candidates. And I think what Erica is saying about active parents, that's critically important, both as to saying what you don't like, but also what you do like. Like, how do we teach ethnic studies? There are a lot of ways. There are a lot of ways to do it. I can think of stories about people in the community who, for example, Cruz Reynoso, the former California Supreme Court justice, he started out growing up in a small town in Orange County. By the time he was about 10 years old, he went all around the block, all around the neighborhood, because his part of town, the Mexican part of town, as it was segregation, they were going to they were going to take away mail delivery. And he organized everybody. He wrote to the Postmaster General. The Postmaster General sent people out. They thought they were talking to an adult, a community organizer. Then they found out they're talking to a kid. But that's how he started his career, as being an activist, knowing how to advocate, becoming a lawyer, going and becoming a judge. There's so many stories that demonstrate how people live. I mean, one of the basics of the original origins of public schools is creating good citizens. It's very hard to have good citizenship if we don't understand all the communities that are amongst us in the classroom. So there are ways to teach ethnic studies. I had, and thanks to Lynette Major, they got a map associated with it of 10 places where families can go around town, understanding our good points and our bad points about different ethnic challenges, overcoming discrimination, victories. Ethnic studies is really all around us, but it's how we teach it. And I think as part of any kind of a advocacy is both telling the elected officials, those responsible, here's how you're doing it wrong, but also here's how we want you to do it right.
I think in terms of the political dimensions of this is that, going back to that actual election with Matt Alexander, who basically just sort of skirted down. It was between him and John Jerson, apparently, of all people, for the last slot. And yet, despite being the bottom of that ballot, he's probably the most. I suspect he's probably has the most influence of all the members of the school board, simply because he's been there for a while and he has and because of his connections. But the other issue there is, again, it's an at-large election. That 12% is over 122,000 votes. And with district elections, we elect members of the Board of Supervisors with like 10,000 votes, which is crazy to me.
Yeah.
So I think the real issue there is the fact that Board of Education races are, first off, they're considered to be farm teams for higher office. Because and one of the reasons for that is they have less scrutiny than other races. It's just down ballot enough that most of the public don't think about it, and whatever box they'll check is going to be based upon the last endorsement card they get in the mail and look at, or the last online ad they see, or maybe the last news story that they saw about the school board. And a lot of these people aren't real stakeholders because they aren't parents of school district kids. So I think there's a wide range of problems as to, how the school board is getting elected, which to me leads into my favorite argument, which nobody else seems to support at this point, municipalization, which is we should just make the school board an appointed body under the city and county. But, I get that thrown back in my face all the time.
I like that idea. I mean, maybe not for all the positions, but maybe a hybrid approach. I think that sometimes when you have the appointing body that's solid, then that helps a lot to break it up. But if you have leadership that doesn't vet very well, then you might end up with a bunch of Board of Education members that are also very politicized and backing, other policies. So it's maybe having a hybrid approach. But I think just the fact that we elect and we're putting 4 people in at a time is always going to dilute sort of the ability to really see whether this potential board member has majority support. So maybe it's just the way that we're having so many elections in one run that you can win with 12%. It just doesn't make sense. It just allows for easier corruption at the end of the day.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, with the ballots being so long, especially when people decide to, not just in terms of the long list of elected officials, but, the political class will add to that by putting on, a huge number of ballot initiatives. That's another thing that I think should definitely be looked at. I think the current charter reform package looks a little bit at ballot initiatives and how they get put on the ballot, but probably not enough in my opinion. And they didn't have the courage to look at district elections either. But we're starting to stray away from the school board to the school district. But any other further thoughts about what could be done apart from grooming and electing new school board members? Like, for instance, are there any members of the school board who seem to be doing a really good job? Are Sufrita and Parag doing a good job in terms of holding up the moderate end of things, for instance?
Supriya Ray is doing a very good job of asking a lot of questions. And it seemed to be the questions that are on the minds of the average parent and other people at the schools. It's not just the parents who have unanswered questions. It's school personnel and staff. There's so many different groups that go up to the school board meetings, just frustrated. The administrators, the teachers, parents, and students. So Supriya asks a lot of questions, and I think she's in her first year on the job has really done a good job of trying to change things around.
Interesting. Any other thoughts?
I see in the chat there's a question about, can the school board repeal the 1-year ethnic studies requirement? Yes, it was brought. The school board made it its policy. Prior school board for the 1 year, they can make it 6 months, 1 semester. they could eliminate it. This decision about ethnic studies is because the state has backed off from its requirement. This is all on the school board.
Interesting. Yeah, I think part of the issue here is that there's this rhetoric and around the whole issue of San Francisco being a pioneer in ethnic studies, and the desire for teachers, administrators, and bureaucrats to want to be the first or quote unquote most or leader in some policy for its own sake, as opposed to what benefit it may or may not actually have. Maybe the state curriculum is better. Sure, ethnic studies was first pioneered in San Francisco State, and other places, but it doesn't necessarily justify adopting a homegrown policy if it's not as good or if it doesn't serve the public as well as what the state already has to offer.
Yeah, well, but San Francisco likes to do its own thing, and that's why it's always in trouble.
Right. And this is the kind of thing way back months and months and months ago, I had done a story about the whole issue of retroactive approvals of contracts at the school board, which is, the board deals with retroactive approvals occasionally. Other bodies occasionally deal with retroactive approvals because you need to get programs in place right away. But these were for, again, teacher coaching and teacher education services that were run by, people who were connected to a school board member in relatively meaningful ways, either related by marriage, or who had given campaign donations to them, or had worked with them before intensively. And for a contract with that kind of connections to a very influential school board member, in other words, Matt Alexander, to be just put under the rug as a retroactive approval, and then just sort of, pro forma being approved that way, that's another problem. And I think it's part of the same problem, because I think there's this pressure for administrators and teachers to sort of make their bones and build up their resumes with programs that may in fact be of dubious value to students.
Well, I mean, this is a city that can't even. I mean, I appreciate Stephen Sherrill. I met with him last week with Liz, and I appreciate that he's trying to, enforce the ban on doing drugs near schools. But, again, it's already illegal, and in other cities, it's simply not allowed. And why the teachers aren't fighting back and saying we want the same enforcement as other schools in other cities get is beyond me. I mean, we all know that in the marina, we had the problem with Nate and him, his whatever she was, girlfriend, having sex in front of the school, and her performing oral sex on him, and drugs, and shooting up and smoking fentanyl, and nothing happened. And so now we have a new, I don't even know, it's not even binding resolution, just we're gonna make drugs in front of the school a priority, priority A for the police. Well, again, this is just where is the school board on this? Why aren't they screaming and yelling? I know any other school district they would be. I just think their priorities are just wacky.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the problems is if we press the school board as a whole to render an opinion on it, they would give the highly ideological line that it's not good to respond with police because they have guns and they'll shoot people. Which is, I mean, that's actually been said in discussions about other aspects of policy in the city. For instance, transit policy, saying we don't want the police to respond to these situations because, it's going to create an increase in the number of people that get shot.
Well,
yeah,
It doesn't happen in other places. I mean, again, like go to any school district like the one my dad taught at, Fremont Unified School District. Any school district that, where you don't see people doing drugs and having sex in front of the school, it's because the parents don't, scream and yell, and the school board and administration screams and yells, and the police show up. I mean, it just seems like San Francisco makes everything so much harder than it needs to be.
Well, I there is another end to that, and I wouldn't say that necessarily happens in places like Fremont, but if you go to the outer suburbs, occasionally you'll end up with these highly ideological culture war arguments that show up in school in school boards.
Well, Fremont Unified School District's in the Silicon Valley, not
right,
Fremont.
Exactly.
So my dad taught at Monte Vista, Fremont, Cupertino, those schools, and again, the Silicon Valley grew up around him. So, but the fact is the parents were employees at Silicon Valley companies, and they just weren't tolerant of all of this stuff. And I feel like San Francisco. And I just feel like San Francisco is always, behind the curves, and it's the kids who suffer.
Yeah, I think you're right.
They're so busy with their ideology, and I'm really, I have to say the one thing that hasn't been said here, but I'm sure we all think it is. Didn't we get rid of a bunch of losers? Like, why is this school board still so screwed up?
Well, yeah, that's the whole thing. I mean, the thing that really stands out to me, looking at this from a political perspective, is we recalled 3 members of the school board. 2 of which especially were really, really bad. One was actively making, really racist comments about Asian students and families. Another one, was basically, she would literally put up her middle finger in her tweets towards people who criticized her policy views. And not to mention the fact that she is now engaged to a rapist. And then we had Faoluga Maliga, who unfortunately sort of got caught in the crossfire of that, but probably deserved to be recalled too, simply because he just didn't stand up and differentiate himself. So we recalled 3 members.
Mm-hmm.
We had 3 people appointed, of which only one of those 3 appointees is left on the school board. And Sue got herself in trouble by saying some indelicate things about what she thought certain ethnicities' families were doing in terms of raising their kids that may or may not have had any foundation. She got a huge amount of criticism for that. London Breed stepped in and said, "This is a learning situation. She's learned. She's apologized. Let's move forward." But then, it still opened her up to be politically weak, and she got replaced essentially by Alita Fisher, who is a creature of the school district bureaucracy. And Lainey Mohammedi ended up resigning, apparently over disagreements with Matt Wayne. And Phil Kim was brought in her place, and he has turned out to be possibly one of the most arrogant members of the board, non-responsive members of the board. And so it basically seems almost as if, you had a popular movement to to stop and make distinct radical changes, and it just got erased.
Ridiculous.
How did that happen?
Just ridiculous.
That gets back to the discussion we just had earlier about appointed versus elected school board members. In this case, the appointments were not in a line necessarily with the voters, so that has reduced the impact of the recall.
Yeah,
and maybe it's you can tie it to the personalities or the persons rather than systemic. But right now we have a board that is very deferential to the superintendent, even to the extent that when the superintendent hires somebody for her cabinet, The public does not know who that person is. The agenda goes out. It says, we're hiring the associate superintendent for this. Here's the person, name redacted. It's not until the beginning of the actual meeting is the name disclosed to the public. How are the parents, teachers, anybody going to say anything good or bad about that person? But that's what the superintendent insists upon, and the school board goes along.
Wow.
Oh man, crazy. I don't know. It's just a mess. And meanwhile, kids can't read, can't do math. The latest statistics that I saw were just really depressing. I think I've told you guys this before, but years ago I had a friend who came from the public school system in New York, and he was a special ed teacher, and he taught at the school over in the Western Addition. And every year when the school year started, he would take his class to Burger King and give them each $5 and tell them to order. And that's how he saw whether they could read or do math. And about 99% of them couldn't do either. And these are, junior high age kids or older. And I think they were like 14, 15. This is also a class where one time they did show and tell, and a kid brought his father's loaded gun as his show and tell. But he taught in some pretty tough schools in Brooklyn, and he said San Francisco was far worse because he, just everything he dealt with administration wise, and the kids were just the most underprepared kids. And granted, they were special ed, and a lot of them had problems, but he was old fashioned like my dad. If a kid was really struggling and he thought there was something wrong, he'd go to their house. I mean, he'd go to their, and a lot of them were being raised by their grandmas, or, he'd go to the Bayview, he'd go to Hunters Point, he'd go to the projects, he'd knock on the door and say, I'm Mr. Bassinet, and I'm your son's teacher and your grandson's teacher. And they'd 9 out of 10 times they'd invite him in, he'd sit down with them, they'd have a talk, but he burned out. He just couldn't do it anymore because he was the only one doing the heavy lifting. And an interesting side is that he married Tomar Mason, the judge.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was considerably younger than her. And I lost touch with him, but I just remember him telling me these stories of what he was going through and thinking, no wonder, these really good teachers don't want to stick it out. I mean, he got no support, he tried really hard. He did have a couple of success stories that, they'd make it out and do well, go to college, come back to visit. But after about, 7, 8 years, he said, I just can't do this anymore. But it's pretty sad when you have, 14, 15-year-olds and they're pointing at the pictures on the menu at Burger King because they don't know how to read and they don't know how to do math. They'd say, I want that. And they'd say, well, you don't have enough money for that. They didn't know. So that's, that was 15, 16 years ago. So imagine how much worse it's gotten. Yeah, sad stuff because they're certainly not prepared for anything after that.
Well, what you're describing, Susan, with the teacher going out to the house to check up on the student, well, I'm sure he was an outlier even then.
Yep.
But compared to what happens today, and attendance is so abysmal and it's so important, both for the education of the student as well as for the revenue for the district. When a student is absent, the parents or the family gets a robocall. No direct human contact.
Geez. Yeah.
Then if they're absent a few more times, then they get letters in the mail. That's not the way to
get
everybody on board to say, child, you got to get to school and know what the problems are. So, that's one of the reasons why our chronic absenteeism is so high, is because the school hasn't found a good strategy to maybe not do the same thing your teacher example did, but something more engaging.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it just was, again, in my dad's day, same thing, right? He'd just show up at their houses, but it just, there's just a level of lacking of care, I think, or I don't know. That's probably why my friend, burnt out, because he just was the only teacher that even then that was going to those lengths. And he had special ed, so these kids had problems. A lot of them had family problems, and the kid that brought the gun to school, and he had some wacky stories, but made for an interesting. We used to go to Mad Dog in the Fog. He'd pick me up on his motorcycle in my house in the Hayton after he taught, and we'd go to Mad Dog in the Fog, and he would just tell me the crazy stories of the week, and I was like, man, you need a TV show. This is nuts. Mr. Bassinet. That's what it should have been called. But yeah, it was crazy. Just crazy stuff. And I don't know. I don't know what to say about school these days. I over the years, I've gotten clips sent to me from, journalism students who have graduated from, various pretty decent schools. And just I'm continually shocked at the lack of ability to spell and punctuate, and even to string together a really cohesive and interesting sentence. It's I don't know. We're just and I'm terrible at math, so I'm not saying a darn thing about that. I mean, hence the writing gig.
Well, there you go. So we've got elections coming up in next November and next June. And 3 seats on the Board of Education are up again in the November 2026 election. And same with Community College Board. And so far, there are 2 people that have pulled papers for Board of Education. One is Deladette Medina, who unfortunately I think I only know her from the political world of the Latino Democratic Club. And then there's another gentleman named...
No, not that lady, the one that defended Kevin Ortiz.
Quite possibly, yes.
She was co-president of LDC. She resigned, and LDC is no longer a part of the DCCC.
Oh my!
Yeah, that was one of the issues.
Great.
So
and both of those people are running in June against Phil Kim, because Phil Kim has to run in June as well as in November.
Okay. So let's take a look at June. Board of Education seat 2, Phil Kim, Deladette Medina, and Michael Turon. So they're all running for the same seat. At least
they're running for his seat to fulfill or to complete Laney Matamadi's seat. And because of the way the election works, if nobody gets a majority in June, then they all run, or the top 2 run in November, as well as running for the 3 seats in November.
Okay. I am getting ready to look at Michael Turon's LinkedIn page. And it looks like executive data and analytics leader, driving revenue growth, personalization. Let's see. So in other words, this is somebody from the tech industry, basically. Unless, this is San Francisco. But he's on the board member of a company that's based in New York.
Oh, wow.
That's interesting. He has a PhD in applied physics from Cambridge.
Oh, wow.
So that'll be interesting. That almost brings us back to the, maybe he'll be the next Bob Varney. Although Varney was on the college board for a long time. He was like the voice of reason on the college board for years. So I guess that's who we look out for. Anybody have any thoughts? Any final thoughts? Or
No,
okay,
we covered it all.
Thank you for giving time for the schools and what's going on. That obviously is what will ultimately drive the city. We can't have a city that we want to have if the schools are not producing good educational outcomes and increasing in enrollment. Exactly.
So are people seeing? Unfortunately, I do not have direct access to the chat because I haven't set up the new chat, as it were. Are people seeing interesting things in the chat from people?
Here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've covered.
So we've covered it.
Let's see.
Well, in that case, it's almost 12:30. We can head out to enjoy the rest of our Sunday. And all of you who have come to listen to us, also thank you for coming, and have a great Sunday.
And have a great Thanksgiving week.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Have a great holiday.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.